The Kuta Sikha is Chelek Ches, Shelach Gimel, a fascinating Rashi Sikha, which will include Inyonim Ufloim, incredible things, Inyonim and Halacha, Chassidus, and all of that is all tied in to this little tiny Rashi in this week's parsha. Sif Aleph. Shengeret Filmol as Pirush Rashi Alateira Hagama Zerkumt Mefaras ein Pshuter Shel Mikra, wie Rashi allein is Madgish Kama Vakama Pa'amim. Und gleich in der erste Seder Vanili Basi El de Pshutei. It's been discussed many times that the Rashi on Chumash, even though its ultimate purpose is to explain Pshutei Shel Mikra, the literal understanding of the Psukim, Rashi emphasizes this numerous times. And nevertheless, it contains incredible concepts. From all other parts of Torah, including the secrets of the Torah, the esoteric part of Torah, der Wort von alten Rebben, as Pirush Rashi of Chumash is Yeno Shel Torah, as it's brought in Hayom Yom, that what the Alter Rebbe said, that the Rashi on Chumash is Yeno, the wine of Torah, like the wine is extracted from the grapes, so too, what could be extracted from Pshutei Shel Mikra, from the Rashi, is these deepest, most beautiful concepts. But able to dig deep enough and to reach these incredible ideas, and the wine of Torah, in Pirush Rashi, was freer durchlernen of verstehen the Pirush HaPashat. First, you have to learn it through, you learn it properly, and understand the basic, the literal understanding. Because even these incredible ideas and the wine, the secrets, Rashi inserted it within the understanding of Pshutei Shel Mikra. Also in our parsha, we find a Pirush of Rashi, which contains incredible ideas in halacha and also the Chassidus and the secrets of Torah. But first we have to explain the simple understanding, the basic understanding of this Rashi, and only then can we go and understand the Inyanim Ufloim and the Yeno Shel Torah. So let's go to Sif Beis. Sif Beis is taking us to Parsha Shelach. After the Meraglim made their claims against Eretz Yisrael, that we cannot go into Eretz Yisrael, Chas v'Shalom, and Yeshua and Kalev stand up to defend Eretz Yisrael. In Hemshech HaKsuvim in Parshasenu was very erzählt, was Yeshua and Kalev and gesagt al Kol Adas b'nei Yisrael, b'neged dem anaygen in Eretz Yisrael. In the Psukim in our Parsha, when Yeshua and Kalev stand up to speak to the Yidden and tell them their opinion about going into Eretz Yisrael, steht in Pasuk, the Pasuk says, Ach ba Hashem al timreidu, do not rebel against Hashem. V'atem al tiru es ha'ma'aretz, do not be afraid of the people of the land, from the people of the land. Ki lachmeinu heim, they are our bread. Sor tzilam, their protection, their shade has been removed. Rashi maitik difun pasuk divrei al timreidu. Rashi quotes the Dibra Maschel, the words al timreidu, and is mefarish vishuv, and then ve'atem al tiru. When it be al timreidu, then following that is you shall not be afraid. Taichin mefarshim. So what's Rashi saying? So it's really one word, vishuv. So what's Rashi coming to tell us? Rashi kommt sagen, as a hemshech hakosav altem al tiru v'goymar, is nit kein bazunder zach. It's not saying two separate things. Number one, don't rebel, and number two, don't be afraid. Ner al tiru is atitsof on al timreidu. Rashi is telling us that not to be afraid is an outcome of not rebelling. That if you will not rebel against Hashem, that zayin shuv atem al tiru, then the following thing, the subsequent thing is you won't have to be afraid. If you don't rebel against Hashem, then you do not have to be afraid of the people. And Rashi's hechrech of them, and the Mefarshim explain what compels Rashi to say this. He said, Nushini Aseder, from the way the pasuk is structured differently at the beginning and the end. By Altim Reidu steht frier in Vem Hashem. By Altim Reidu, it starts with who to not be afraid of. By Hashem, Altim Reidu. Und bei Altiru steht there noch far Vemen, as Amaretz. And by Altiru, who not to be afraid of, it says afterwards. And do not be afraid of the people. So when it says do not rebel, first it speaks against whom, and then it says what not to do. By Altiru, first it says what not to do, and then it says of whom. For the fact that it's not structured exactly the same implies that they're not two separate statements. If If they were the two separate statements, it would say, do not be afraid do not rebel against Hashem, do not be afraid of the people, or against Hashem, do not rebel, of the people, do not be afraid. For the fact that it says it differently, and Al Timreidu goes straight into the Al Tiru, implies that they are one statement, not two. In parentheses, other from them was to state ve'atem or nit ve'al tiru. From the fact that it says the word ve'atem and not ve'al tiru, which is by Hashem it says al timreidu, and as ve'atem, it seems like a word of connection. It's like trying to connect the two. So either for one of these two reasons, Rashi feels compelled. The fun is Rashi machriach as ve'atem al tiru is a hemshech or tetzaf and al timreidu. That's what the Mefarshim explain. Either the Be'er Yitzchak or the Maskil David, they say that Rashi derives from the structure of the pasuk that this is one statement, and therefore Rashi explains that if it'll be Al Timreidu, then it'll be Al Tiru. The Be'er is a Berkasha. This explanation is hard to understand. But Rashi gedacht meitig sein from pasuk echtem vart fardem b'Hashem. If b'Hashem is part of the reason that's compelling Rashi to reach this conclusion, then he should have included the word Ba'Hashem. Also, which is also part of Rashi's proof, as we said in the previous paragraph, should have also been included in his Dibra Maschil. Or at least mention the Atem al Tiru, hinted in the word V'Gaimar. Because these are the words that are the proof to Rashi's Pirush. Von dem was Rashi bringt nicht dem Wort Ba'Hashem und nicht die weitere Gewerte vom Pasuk. Is move on as ein Hechrich is beikir al Kolpanim nicht von Lashon HaKosov nor von dem Teichen Inyan al Timreidu. From the fact that Rashi does not bring these words in the Dibra Maschil, this tells us that Rashi is deriving his Pirush not so much from the structure of the pasuk, from the wording, but more from the content of the pasuk, and we have to understand where in the words Al Timreidu, in the understanding of the words Al Timreidu, does does Rashi deduce this pshat that if it's Al Timreidu, then Vishuv Al Tiru. We're going to continue with questions on Rashi with the next couple of Rashis. Siv Gimel. Danach stellt sich Rashi auf die Werte ki lachmeinu heim und das mefarish neuchlem kalechem. We will eat them like bread. Is nicht verstandig? Here too we have some questions. Aleph. Was is the Rashi mechadish? What's Rashi telling us? It says that moving bepashtos as lachmeinu heim benegeben yadam meitas nid as dimensions an lechem. Clearly, if we're saying about people that they are bread, we don't mean literally that they're bread because they're people. Nor is an Ausdruck as me vetzei menatzeach zan as gering wie essen lechem. Ausdruck means an expression. Lachmeinu heim is an expression, a euphemism. We're going to win them as easy as eating bread. So why does Rashi have to say anything? Ki lachmeinu heim, they're bread, they're our bread. They're as easy as bread. Why does Rashi have to say anything? Li'idach. If Rashi is going to explain something, since the intent is that the conquering will be as easy as eating, why does it matter if it's bread or a different food? We'll eat them. First is their diuk lachmeinu kalechem. Why does the pasuk say lachmeinu heim? And why does Rashi emphasize kalechem? Why does Rashi create an emphasis that the ease is like bread? Gimel aderabbe, or actually on the contrary, Rashi gedaf mevayer zayin neuchlem kemachol bechlal nit davke lechem. Even though the pasuk says lachmeinu heim, Rashi should have explained to us that we don't mean literally bread, we mean food, that we can eat them like food. As Rashi himself, for example, in Parshas Vayetze, Rashi says, "Kol dvar meichel kori lechem." Any kind of food is called sometimes lechem. Lechem is a overarching term that means food. So it should have, if Rashi has to explain something and tell us that it's going to be as easy as food, as eating food, Rashi should have said noichlem kemeichel. That lechem doesn't mean literally bread. Why is there an emphasis on bread? Especially if we know from other places that Rashi clearly tells us that lechem doesn't always have to mean bread. Dalid, Parvos is Rashi meitik from pasuk echdem vort ki, welcher is nit mefarish. In the Dibra Maschil, Rashi says ki lachmeinu heim. Rashi is explaining the lachmeinu, noichlem kalechem. Why does Rashi add in the word ki in the Dibra Maschil? Sif Dalid, one last Rashi with questions, and actually this next Rashi is what the bulk of the Sikha is going to be based on. After that, Rashi quotes the word Sart Silam from the Pasuk. Their shade, their protection has been removed, and is Mefarish and explains Moginam v'chaskam, their protection and their strength. Gshedim shebehamesu, the righteous amongst them died. Iyov shayamegin aleim, referring specifically to Iyov, who was protecting over them. Davar acher. Then Rashi brings a second pshat. Tziloi shel hamokoim sarmei aleim. The shade of Hashem, the protection of Hashem, was removed from above them. Darfn verstehen. Parvos neitik Rashi and Tzvei Pirushim. We have to understand this is a classic Rashi Sikha question. Why does Rashi need two Pirushim? What is the Maile and Yeder von Zei? And what is the advantage to each of them that Rashi has to bring one, this one, and then another one, and then, as we'll see in the Sikha as well, why is the first one brought first and the second one brought second? So these are our questions on Rashi. Number one, what is the hechrich for Rashi to say v'shuv al tiru, that it's one statement and not two? Why does Rashi explain Neuchleim Kalechem? Why does he emphasize Kalechem? Why is there a key in the Dibur HaMaschil? And why are there two Pirushim on Sar Tzila? They're beard and Pirush Rashi, and now we're going to understand Rashi. And in order to understand Rashi, we have to understand what was bothering Rashi in the first place. Rashi's hechrech to learn as ba'atem al tiru is atitzof and al timredu unit kinin b'fnei atzmei. What is compelling Rashi to say that the atem al tiru is an outcome, is a result of al timredu and not its own separate command or statement, is as follows. Frier wird erzählt, as the Meraglim haben geteinet, earlier it says that the Meraglim, the spies, claimed as ha'ama yeshivaretz, the nation living in the land is strong. The people that we saw that were very large people of size. We were in our own eyes like locusts. And that's what we seem to be like in their eyes. It was a frightening situation. The Meraglim were afraid, and they were saying that it was a frightening situation. Yeshua and Kalev do not deny these claims. How could Yeshua and Kalev demand from the Yidden not to be afraid of the people of the land? Without giving a reason why they shouldn't be scared. The Meraglim made a good case of why they should be scared. Yeshua and Kalev said, don't be scared. Why not? And this question is even stronger. After Moshe Rabbeinu, after this whole story, Moshe Rabbeinu says that we're not going into Eretz Yisrael. They wake up in the morning. The Yidden said we're going. Moshe Rabbeinu says do not go. And do not get destroyed. The people of Amalek and the people of Canaan are sitting there, and they're going to destroy you. They're going to come out against you and going to hurt you. Even Moshe Rabbeinu believed that there was a reason to be afraid. So how do Yeshua and Kalev say don't be afraid? Another thing that's bothering Rashi. Mit die Werte bei Hashem al timredu, hat der Yeshua und Kalev gemeint zu sagen, dass man soll keinem sein, dem Eibischen Sivus gegen Eretz Yisrael. What did they mean, don't rebel against Hashem? They meant, let's fulfill what Hashem wants of us, and let's go to Eretz Yisrael. So they should have spoken directly, straightforwardly, about this specific detail. Gain in Eretz Yisrael. They should have said, let's go. Why have this more vague demand? Don't rebel against Hashem. Why couldn't they just say what they wanted? Chevra, let's go to Eretz Yisrael. So these are two things that are bothering Rashi. Number one, what's the answer? Why do Yeshua and Kalev not address the question that going into Eretz Yisrael is a frightening situation? And number two, why couldn't Yeshua and Kalev just say, let's go to Eretz Yisrael? These are the questions that Rashi is addressing when he says, excuse me, Al timredu v'shuv v'atim al tiru. Yeshua v'kalev haben gesagt, dass al tiru wird sein atitzof and al timredu. They're saying that al tiru, don't be afraid, is a result of al timredu. It's true that the people are strong. And there is reason to be afraid of them. Von deswegen, nevertheless, if you're not going to rebel, you're going to follow what the Eibishter commands. Shuv is demot netak kein shum ort afilu al pi teva tzmei rabin. Then because you are going in the ways of Hashem. Therefore, this leaves no room to be afraid, even naturally speaking. Even for a strong nation, because you have the koyach of Hashem. They were saying, yeah, they're strong. It's true that they're strong. But if you go with Hashem, you have no reason to be afraid. That's it. They didn't say, let's go to Eretz Yisrael. They used the words, let's not rebel against Hashem. Because not rebelling against Hashem is what cancels out the claim that the people are strong. And it's the reason why not to be afraid. And then, if you're not going to rebel against Hashem, then you don't have no reason to be afraid, and then you can go straight to Eretz Yisrael. So they did mean to go to Eretz Yisrael, but they were saying it in a more vague manner, because they were trying to address the question, how can we go into this frightening place? And the answer is, you're going with Hashem. So that's the first Rashi. Rashi's hachrich is not from the structure of the pasuk, like the Mefarshim said earlier, but it's from the pshat of the pasuk. Here, Yeshua and Kaleb are telling him to go to Eretz Yisrael. How and why? Go with Hashem. Hashem will go with you. You have no reason to be afraid. Vav. Now we go to the next Rashi. Kilach meinohem. Al pize is moving must behem shekol zeh. Rashi mefarish kilach meinohem nechlim kalechem. This will also explain to us that Rashi says we'll eat them like bread. Do kenmen. Here we can. B'meila darfman, and therefore we have to. Taichin lachmeinu b'pashos lechem. And that question we said, why when you say neichlim kemaichel? We'll eat it like food. Here we mean specifically bread. And that's why Rashi has to say kalechem, because here when it says lachmeinu, the pasuk means specifically something to do with bread, and not any other type of food. Oh, but so let's go back a second. How do we get to the bread? Lule pirush Rashi. If not for what Rashi said, nechlim kalechem. Voltman getaich lachmeinu hem. Now we would have touched this whole pasuk, this whole part differently. Lachmeinu in dem inyan as the knisa l'Eretz Yisrael und dem kibush von dem am sheba is mucharch punkt fi lachem. What we would have said is ki lachmeinu hem means that we don't be afraid of the people of the land, because we have to go into Eretz Yisrael. It is a necessity, like eating bread. Just like eating bread is a necessity, so too going to Eretz Yisrael is a necessity, and therefore we can't be afraid. Und damit wird gewähnt verstandig der Vergleich zu Lechem Davke. Und echt der Nesinas Tam Ki Lachmeinu Hem. And this would explain the word bread. And this would explain why it says Ki Lachmeinu Hem. Al Tiru Samara, don't be afraid of the people. Vai Lachmeinu Hem. Zeir Kibush, Knisa Eretz Yisrael, conquering them. And our entry into Eretz Yisrael is Muchrech Azevi Lechem, is necessary like bread. Ubemele is Muchrech Azal Tiru, therefore we have no choice, you can't be afraid. We have to go into Eretz Yisrael. So that's how we would have touched. Why should I not be afraid? Because I have no choice. I have to go into Eretz Yisrael. The going into Eretz Yisrael is a necessity. But as Rashi is mefaresh as v'atem al tiru. Is the farmas altim reidu. But now that we just learned in the previous seif that Rashi is teaching that the reason why you don't have to be afraid is because altim reidu mitzadem was begepen kech when because we're going with the kech of Hashem. Kemedich shein nitzagen as the tam of altiru is das was lachmeinuim. We can't anymore say that the reason for altiru is because it's of the necessity. First, it's an anoitik filechem. It's necessary like bread. Because we already gave a different reason. We said altim reidu. We're going with the kech of Hashem. Oich. If we were basing this on the necessity, this would raise a question. The Yidden ultimately survived another 39 years not being in Eretz Yisrael. So if it was such a necessity, how did they survive 39 years? Obviously the necessity wasn't that great. So therefore, Rashi doesn't want you to, if Rashi says nothing, we would touch the pasuk, noitik vilechem, necessary like bread. Rashi doesn't want you to go there. A, because he just touched that the reason for Al Tiru was for Al Timreidu, and B, because the Yidden ultimately stayed out of Eretz Yisrael another 39 years. Therefore, Rashi says what it means to say is that when you will go in the way of Hashem, then you have nothing to be afraid of, and or because you are going to eat them up like bread. Therefore, the comparison to bread, and specifically to bread, is not so much to the necessity of the bread, nor how we get the bread. They'll conquer Eretz Yisrael like eating bread. What is the significance of eating bread. In Vasas Pashteit, the Meile von Achilas Lechem, and Rashi didn't say anything. Rashi says Nechem Kalechem. I should have explained. What does he mean by that? It says Daf Rashi Nidruistaichen. Rashi does not have to explain it to us. Val der Bechamish Lemikra, the Shengelan Frin in Parasas B'Shalach. The Bechamish Lemikra already learned this in B'Shalach. Rashi zokt as lechem v'shal u'kahikin. Over there, we had a sicha on this as well. That there was lechem and there was basar. The lechem was a fair request. It was a legitimate request, and therefore the Eibishter gave it to them. But in a friendly way and with a shining countenance. But the basar, which was a inappropriate request or an unfair request, the Eibishter gave it to them not b'derech chiba. So we know already that when the Eibishter gives bread, the Eibishter gives it b'derech chiba. So when we learn over here Neichlem Kalech, and we know to reference the Parshas B'Shalach, B'Shal Ukehegi was V'dashi Zokt, Lechem B'Shal Ukehegi, the bread that was a fair request, but the Eibishter gave it b'derech chiba. The Eibishter gives it in a friendly way with a shining countenance. So when we come to the words Lachmeinu Heim, when we learn it as das meint Neichlem Kalechem, and Rashi teaches us that it means we will eat them like bread. Versteht man as das meint as the Eibishter wird geben zu eaten them kibush achilas umes. The Eibishter will give us the conquering and the eating, so to speak, of the nations in an even von der Chiba. In a way of friendliness and the shining countenance, as they gets like the Eibishter gives bread. So the pasuk is saying, Rashi is telling us, Neichlem Kalechem, not Kemaichel, not like any other food, specifically like bread. We will eat them up, which means the Eibishter will give them into our hands, Kalechem, with the ease, because the Eibush is going to give it to us, but derech chiba, with a friendly way, with panim meiris. And then b'shtei deich the time of altiru ki lachmeinu heim. That's it. Rashi says the word ki in the dibur hamaschil because this is part of the altiru. Klal altiru samoritz. You don't have to be afraid at all. Because they will be given into your hands in a friendly way and with the shining countenance of the Eibush above. So the pasuk is now flowing. Hashem al timredu. If you will not rebel against Hashem, then al tiru asamaoretz, you do not have to be afraid of the people. Ki lachmeinu heim, because through the fact that you're going with the koyach of Hashem, the Eibishter will give it to you, and you'll have no problem with the conquering. Oh. So far so good. Now let's go into Seif Zayin, which is going to address the Sar Tzilam. The two Pirushim. Why are the two Pirushim and Sar Tzilam? But again, these two Pirushim von Rashi and Sar Tzilam is move on the Meile von Zweiten Pirush auf den Ersten von Lashon Rashi Gufa. So we're going to start with explaining why there's a second Pirush. Why does Rashi have the second? Why does Rashi give us a second Pirush? What's the Meile, the advantage of the second explanation? And you see it in Rashi's word itself. In Zweiten Pirush, sagt Rashi, Tzilei Shalamokim Sar Me Alehem. Rashi adds in the word me'aleim. Hashenki metchilas adibur, by meitig sein die Wörter vom Posik, but das is shaykh b'shavet zu beide Pirushim, is meitig nor die Wörter Sar Tzilam. In the dibur hamaschil, which applies to both Pirushim, and including the first Pirush, Rashi only uses the word Sar Tzilam, nitem vort me'aleim, not the word me'aleim. In the second Pirush, Rashi adds in the word me'aleim. What's he telling us? Vabir bazeh. Der Lashon Sar, ubefrat Sar me'aleim. The word Sar, and especially mei aleim, from them, meant as the Zach is a weggegangen from Fuzi is given frier, mei aleim, means that the thing was removed from where it was, und sie gefindt sich jetzt in der zweiten Ort, and was moved somewhere else. Sie ist da b'metzias sich später, but she still exists. In other words, you could say something disappeared, something stopped, doesn't exist anymore. The word sar doesn't mean that. Sar means it was removed from this place and put somewhere else. Aber late in the Ersten Pirush. Kshedim shebehem meisu. According to the first Pirush, that the Kshedim, the righteous amongst them died. There's no tzeil at all. Patanit the Lashon Sar. Then the word Sar doesn't fit. And especially not that it was removed from them, which is an extra emphasis that it still exists somewhere. From them it was removed, but it's somewhere else. So those words don't really fit well. The Rebbe led Rashi at Zweiten Pirush, therefore Rashi has to learn a second Pirush. As Silor means Silor Shalamokim, that it means the shade of Hashem. Leidem Pirush is glatik the Lashon Sar, ubefrat Sar Me'aleim, and this, according to this understanding, the word Sar and Me'aleim fits in so much better. Silor Shalamokim is Alam Olda. The Eibishter's shade always exists. I made a covenant with you and with your offspring and with everything that is alive, which means that the Eibishter is always protecting. I don't know the word protecting. The Eibishter is always there for creation. But the Eibishter's Racham is on all of his creations. But on these specific people, he was removed from them. So if you say Tzila Shalamakim, the word Sar Me'aleim makes sense. So why does Rashi bring a second pirush? Very simple. The pasuk says the word Sar and Tzila Me'alehem. So Rashi has a hardship, a difficulty with saying that it means Kshedim Shebahem, because the Kshedim that were Mesu, they weren't just Sar. Therefore Rashi brings a second pirush that means that where the word Sar Me'alehem fits in better. Aber ich lei dem ersten pirush can we mefader sein al kolpana medeichak de lashon sar me'aleh? And we could answer this question. Bedoichak, meaning it's difficult, but we could answer this question. Afal pi as the fi pirush zeh is tzilom mer nitav mitzias. Even though according to this first pirush, tzilom doesn't exist anymore, we could still teach it. But the far bring this Rashi, which is why Rashi still brings it. V'yiseidim is al erster pirush. Rashi even brings it the first pirush. In other words, if the words don't fit, then why did Rashi even bring it in the first place? But it is answerable, albeit bedoichak, and therefore, but because it's answerable, Rashi could still bring it. How will we answer it? Like this, kid, look, come on. Yeshua v'kalev v'nzeir zagin sart silam ksheinu shemeisu. When Yeshua v'kalev are speaking to the Yidden and they're saying sart silam, zayin doch nit uisen gewend zu reden wegen silam, wegen die ksheinu shebehem. Their point wasn't to discuss the situation of the kshedim, of the protection, of the actual tzilam. Nor wegen dem ha'aretz. Of them and tzilam is making. They were talking about the people upon whom the tzel, the shade, was protecting. As about since there's no one to protect them, is altiros ha'aretz. You have nothing to be afraid. Is da doch negea nit was es tut sich mit tzilam. So the important thing here is not what happened to the tzel, where did it go, nor was es tut sich mit ha'aretz. What is happening with the people? Are they protected? Are they not protected? Und der Pfarrer haben sie gesagt, sart sila me'aleim, as nitavos sumeir haben farzei, weil von zei hat sich schon abgetan sie erzähl. What the pasuk is, Yeshua Kal was saying is, you don't have to be afraid of them. They do not have a protection anymore. Chachman Yetzil is nitbay sar nor mesu, even though in reality their tzel died, but they didn't. Yeshua Kal don't have to talk about that. Because the important thing is that you don't have to be scared of them. Why not? Because their shade, their protection is gone. So this is how you would teach it ein according to the first pirush. That even though the word sar doesn't fit so well, but since Yeshua and Kalev are talking about the people, so the important thing is sar tzila me'aleim. They don't have protection. That's the important part. That's relevant here. What happened to Sar? Was he maced? Was he moved? Was he somewhere else? Is irrelevant. So therefore, they could even use the word Sar Be'aleim because that's the most important detail, that the Am Ha'aretz don't have protection. That's how you would teach it according to the first pirush. That's how you would answer the question why you use the word Sar. So the reason why Rashi brings the second pirush is because the word Sar Me'aleim fits better according to the second pirush. Why does it mean the first pirush? Because you could even explain sar me'aleim according to the first pirush. But because, as we said, this answers a doichek, Rashi brings a second pirush. The first pirush is answerable and therefore it fits. And on the contrary, Rashi brings the Meginam v'chaskam first. Why? In Pasus Haksuvim is der pirush b'stabar yeser. When you look at the flow of the pasuk, this pirush, the first pirush of Rashi, makes more sense. But when we bow that the psukim reden wegen die umois is mistaber as mit dem Wort silom make ben zeir tzel kshedim shebahem. It would make more sense to say that since we're talking about the people, al tiru es am haaretz ki lachmeinu heim, we're talking about them. It would make sense that silom means something about them, not something that's coming above them. Ni tzilish lamakim. Befratas damol says glatter as a staying sar hat sail. If we were talking about the Eibishter, you should have said the shade, the shadow was removed. The fact that it says sar tzilam, their shade, and we're talking about them, what their matzav is, it makes sense that the tzel will be something that's part of them. When their father is their pirush magina v'chaskon, the pirush rishon va'ikri, and that's why this pirush is first, because it makes more sense to say that the tzilam is one of them, is part of them. But hayos that the word sar me'aleim is not so gishmak, so therefore Rashi brings a second pirush that it means tzilay shalamokim. So ad kan we explained these three Rashis and the flow of the psukim, the very, very geshmaka way that Yeshua and Kalev are saying, don't be afraid of, don't rebel against Hashem, which means do the will of Hashem, know that Hashem is with you, and then you have no reason to be afraid, because when Hashem is with you, then the conquering of the land becomes as easy as bread, because the Eibishter is giving it. But there's two pirushim. One pirush means maginam v'chaskam, that the tzeil is part of them, which fits in with the word tzilam. But sar me'aleh doesn't fit so well, so Rashi brings a second pirush that it means tzilay shel hamokim. Siv Ches and on, we're going to go into the Yanim Ufloim and into the Yena Shal Torah, and then at the very end we're going to go back to the Psukim a little bit, but it's going to be miyusad based on some of the Yanim Ufloim. And it's going to seem at first like we went totally off topic, and then obviously we're going to come right back on track. Siv Ches. From the Yanim Ufloim and Pirush Rashi, here are some of the incredible ideas in Rashi. The Rabbi usually uses the word Yanim Ufloim when he can intertwine other Chelke HaTorah Halacha and so on into the Pshuta Shel Mikra. The two Pirush Rashi and Antoloi in their Plukte von Ramam V'Raivet. These two Pirushim in Sar Tzilam, if it means Maginam V'Chaskam, or it means Tzilay Shel HaMokayim, will be dependent on a machlekes between the Rambam and the Raivet. The Rambam paskint in Hilchis Sha'ar Oves Satuma. The Rambam paskins Shchitas Akum Nevela, that if a goy shechts an animal, even if he shechts it kadin, properly, and supervised by a yid, nevertheless it's an avela, umetam o b'masa, and it becomes tamei if you carry it, and for sure if you touch it. In other words, it's not just treif, it's also tamei. A hilchas tumah v'tara. Echad ha'akum, echad ha'kusi, ha'geteshav, shchitas an avela. Whether, regardless of what type of akum it is, shchitas an avela. The card of Be'enai, Sha'avza Medivrei Seifrim, Sha'arei Tumas Avedazara, Tumas Tikrevasa Medivreim. The Rambam holds that this is a midrabanon, which means to say, the Rambam is saying that the reason why this shchita is tamei is not just, is a part of Avedazara. You used that a guy is chashut on Avedazara. So when he shechted this behemoth, we're cheshedim that it was l'shem Avedazara, and therefore, yes, that Tumas Avedazara, Tumas. If a goy shechts an animal for Avodah Zarah is tamei midrabanan, therefore this would become tamei. In other words, this is the Rambam's chiddush that it's not just treif, it's also tamei because of the halachas of Avodah Zarah. The Rabbi is masik of Rambam. The Rabbi asks a question on the Rambam Unuzakt, and this is what he says as follows: Akum him kebehemis. Akum are like animals. Ve'in metamen ve'in bitamen. They are not tamei, and they cannot make something else tamei. If a guy touches something, it doesn't make it tamei. They are a nation that is compared to a donkey. Hein goyim kimar midlila, like a drop in the bucket, which means they have no significance. That's kulam yisaruach. They are carried by the wind. They're nothing. And if someone considers them as something, asaf ruach b'chafnav is like trying to catch air in your palm, in your hand. So we're not yet sure what exactly the Rabbi is arguing on, but the Rabbi is coming strongly against the Rambam that akum are they're nothing. So the Kesef Mishnah says, akum is ein mitamin v'ein mitamin. Why is it relevant with regards to tumah over here that a goy can't become tamei or can't make something else tamei? We're not talking about a goy himself. We're talking about shchitas akum. The fact that a guy is not tummy, the guy can't make something tummy, would be, I mean, say if it touches something, would be irrelevant to the guy whether a guy could make something tummy through shchita. Is mevar the Ragachover. So the Ragachover explains like this: the Asaga Sarayvid. He says like this: then is shayich as the shchita zol makalkel hanamachal faranavela. When could the shchita ruin something, defile something? If the person that's slaughtering the animal actually is considered to be something according to halacha. If the person that's doing the shchita does not have a halachic status, then he can't ruin it. Und das sagt der Rabbi, wie bald das Akum im Behemoth vein mit Tamen vein bitamin. This is a ruach hedes. Since they cannot make something tummy, they cannot become tummy. They are air. They are nothing. He's the shaykh sagen, as shchitas on makalkas und machen the farn avela. You can't say that their shchita should ruin and make the animal into an avela. Und der Rebbe learned the Rabbi, as shchitas akum nevela, he says nicht weil der akum is makalkel. Nor mit sadem was shchitas akum is nicht kein shchita. When mele is nevela kibehemish shemei semeyalel. Therefore, the Rabbi holds that the reason why it's a nevela is not because it was slaughtered by the guy, but because it's a dead animal. If an animal drops dead, it's an avela. So too, here was an animal that is now not alive anymore, and therefore it's an avela. And therefore the Ravid is going to hold that it's not metami b'masa either, because the akum has no halachic power to do anything. So this is how the Ragachover explains this machlekes Rambam and Ravid. The Rambam holds that the akum has the power to make it into an avela, and therefore there's also tamei, also metame, b'masa. The Ravid says that the akum has no power to do anything, and therefore it is a taka on avela because it's a dead animal, but it has no. But it's not because of the shchitas akum, and therefore there's no tumah here either. Before we continue as to how the Ragachover applies this machlekes to another area, we're going to learn in the brackets just to understand the words ein metamin ve'ein mitamin in the Ravid. The Rebbe is going to ask, if the akum is a mitzias of heder, is a non-existent entity, then why do you have to say that they're not tumah and they don't make other things tumah? Then it gave us an header. According to the Ragachover, what's important here is that they don't exist. Well, the mind of Kamina, what das is in the meaning from Tumah Dafke ein metamin v'chulu. Well, it's not irrelevant that with regards to Tumah, they don't make, they're not tummy or don't make other things tummy. It seems irrelevant. The whole point of the Ragachover is much more than that they don't even exist halachically. It came in as follows. Everyone will agree, even that Ravid agrees, that there are halachic ramifications to the existence of a goy. For example, if a guy worships Avodah Zarah, that Avodah Zarah becomes aser to a yid. If a guy was totally a Metzias of Eder, was a non-existent entity, then the fact that he kneeled to an idol would not change the status of the idol, but the halacha is that it does. So we see that in certain aspects of halacha, the existence of a guy is considered an existence void, and there are other examples. The Rambam can't make the Ravid cannot make a blanket statement that the akum are always halachically speaking a non-existent entity. The Rebbe is a Moshe from a buyer as ein metamin ve'ein mitamin as b'shayches to tumah behemoths, that with regards to the halachas of tumah they are like behemoths. Beged head they are non-existent. Also for ruach b'chafnaf like air catching air. And therefore they cannot cause that the behemoth that was slaughtered should become tummy b'masa, masa, and for sure by touching. So the Ravid says the words ein metamin ve'mitamin because since his argument with the Rambam is with regards to tumah, so the Ravid says with regards to tumah they are a non-existent entity, and therefore they do not have the power to make this tummy b'masa. Fine. So the Ravid, so now we understand that the machlekes of the Ragachover explains the machlekes. Rambam and Ravid are arguing whether akum are considered as a halachic entity, halachically as an entity or not. And then the Ragachover continues based on this. The machlekes from Rambam and Ravid, see akum and begedim mitzias or together header. Are they classified as an entity, or are they classified as a non-entity? This brings another machlekes which would follow their shittas, their approaches. See by akum mishayach geder hashgacha pratis, if by a goy the concept of hashgacha pratis exists, it's individual divine providence. According to the Rambam, that they are a halachic entity, they also would be in the concept of hashgacha pratis. Because the Torah recognizes them as an entity, Torah would also recognize that the Eibishter is mashgiach on them in an individual way. Uladasa Raivid as design and begeder header, but according to the Rambam that they are a non-entity, is bazinita geder shechapratis. Then if they don't exist, then there's no individual providence of Hashem upon them. So this is a major ramification, that comes that is understood based on this machlokes Rambam and Ravid with regards to akum arehenke behemis or not hashachabratis. Are they considered a metzias, and therefore the Eibush says mashkiach bepratius, Eibush just supervises them individually like lahavdil yidden, or not? In Sif Tes, we're going to say that now we can understand the two pshatim and Rashi. These two taichin, whether tzila means their own protection or it means the protection of Hashem, then now we could see how they are dependent on the opinions of Rambam and Ravid. According to the first pshat of Rashi, B'neneach are a non-entity. Kshitas arrive like the Ravid. Therefore, we can say that Tzila means the shade of Hashem. But is given freer Tzila when it's that before Hashem was protecting them and now it was removed from them. Because that would mean that they were a real entity. The shade of Hashem means it's measured, it's tailor-made to their existence. Like a shadow that is shaped based on the shape of the person. But we just said that according to this opinion, they don't exist. And therefore they do not have the individual protection of Hashem. You can't say because if they are a non-entity, then they have no Hashgacha Pratis and they have no tzeil. A tzeil is the whole concept of tzeil is that it's prati, is that it's unique to the individual. Therefore we have to say that this was something from within themselves. Amongst them, they had protection. You can't say that it means that the Eibishter's shade was removed from them, because the Eibishter, there is no shade from Hashem. They would say that the Goyim are a halachic entity. And therefore they are part of a Hashgacha Pratis. That the Eibishter's shade is relevant to them. So Shaykh to their Metzias, it is connected to their existence canal, and therefore you can say that now that the Eibishter is ready to go into Eretz Yisrael, the Eibishter removed that protection, that shade from them, which initially was there. So now we took a machlekes, Rambam and Ravid, and Hilchis Tumah, that the Rogatchover applied to the concept of Hashgacha Pratis. And we brought it back to our Rashi, that the two pshatim in Rashi, Sar Tzilam, fit according to the two opinions of the Rambam and Ravid. That according to the Ravid, there's no tzeil of the Eibishter on them, and therefore Tzilam means Maginam v'chaskam. According to the Rambam, there is a tzeil of the Eibishter on them, and therefore you could say Tzilei Shalamakim Sar Me'aleim. In Sif Yud and Yud Aleph, we're going to go a little bit deeper into understanding this concept of this tzeil on the Yidden versus the Goyim, and understand a little bit more al pi Chassidus, that the idea of tzeil means that our actions bring down a mirror image above to what we did. That's the idea of tzeil. That when we do something, Hashem matches what we did with a hamshacha milamayla. It's also going to address the idea of schar v'einish by Umas Ha'olam. How do they get rewarded if they don't exist, or they don't have a halachic entity? So and then we'll understand even a little bit deeper the two pirushim in Rashi. Tzifyut. And we can understand this even clearer when we bring in Chassidus. Until now, we didn't touch Chassidus yet. We said that it was a machlekes Rambam and Ravid, Hashgacha Pratis, and we went straight back to the Rashi. Let's employ the understanding of this according to Chassidus, and then we'll understand it even clearer. The pirush von Tzila Shel HaMokim is as the Pu'ulus Ha'adam Tun Ufan Inyan Lamayla B'dugmas U'B'tzir HaPu'ula. What does it mean, Tzila Shel HaMokim? It means, according to Chassidus, that the person's actions down here, they accomplish something above that matches what was done down here. Similar to the image of what was done here is the hamshacha, what is the impact and what comes down from above. Similar to what the Baal Shem Tov says, teaches on the pasuk Hashem tzilcha, Hashem is your shadow. That according to what a yid does down here, this accomplishes this impact similar to that above. Like the shadow of a person. From the mention that the movements that the person makes, this same thing happens to the shadow. If a person waves his hands, the shadow will also wave its hands. And so similarly, when a yid does something down here below in this world, above, there is a reflection of that being impacted and accomplished above. Excuse me. Similarly, will also be when we say the shade of Hashem with regards to the nations. As the Eibusher does not withhold the reward for any of his creations. Their actions also draw down a shadow. To say something from above is drawn down to them as well. Then when they do a positive deed, for example, they fulfill one of the 7 mitzvahs that were given to Bnei Noach, then they receive schar. Und wenn sie seid over Aveda, they bring down a shade, a shadow, something that was similar to what they did, hezik, negative, and einish, a punishment. If they did something negative, then they bring down a negative element, which causes them something negative to happen to them. So that's how you would understand that Hashem Tzilcha. That's what Hashem is talking about Yidden. But if you apply that to all of the nations of the world, then when we do something down here in this world, we draw down from above a matching reaction. But this concept would only fit according to the Rambam. Then you can say that something is being drawn down from above in a specific image, which is consistent with the fact that they are part of the concept of Shechach Pratis. So therefore, Hashem can draw down something from above based on their actions. But according to the Ravid, that they are a non-existent entity. Then you can't say that their actions bring down a matching reaction from above. The whole idea, pratis, something can happen, and we'll see that in a moment. But to say that each individual action and each individual person can draw something down from above as a reaction to what they did, it doesn't work according to the Ravid. So the question is going to be, how is it possible for there to be a concept of schar v'oinish, of consequences, of reward and punishment by Yom HaSo'ilam? If there's no Hashgacha Pratis and they are a mitzias of head, they're a non-entity, then how is there any reaction to their actions? If it's the Rebbe explains as follows: is the schar ve'einish by Yom HaSo'ilam atetzah v'skum b'derech memela b'derech tofel von tachas b'riyasam is an outcome, is a result that happens on its own, based on the purpose of their creation. In other words, when they serve their purpose, then by itself, they will receive a piece of that pie. They will receive a reward because the purpose for which they were created was being fulfilled, as we will explain. Similar to the fact that we find reward and punishment with regards to animals. But the Torah says that if a person did an inappropriate act with a behemoth, so the behemoth has to be killed. Even though the behemoth, you can't blame the behemoth for the sin. Behemoth machata. The Gemara asks, what did the behemoth do? Since the person stumbled because of the behemoth, Therefore, the behemoth gets punished. It's not a punishment. The behemoth didn't do something wrong that it has to be punished for it. But rather, since the whole purpose of the creation of this animal was to serve the human being, so if the behemoth does not serve the human being, and rather she brings him to stumble, therefore she has no reason to exist. Therefore she has to be killed. Not, in other words, not punishing it. It has no purpose of existence, and therefore it has to be removed from this world. Now that similarly, you could say with regards to the nations, since the Eibishter created the whole world for the Yidden, is does need for the mitzvahs and establish Yisrael, but the tachlis of the etzem kiyam mitzvahs. Now it's saying in Tafel was for Yisrael. When the Bnei Noach were given Sheva mitzvahs, it wasn't like the mitzvahs that Yidden have, which are the mitzvah itself is the purpose. The mitzvahs Bnei Noach, the purpose is that they should create a world for the Yidden. Zeir mitzvah and mitzvah Yishuv Eilam. The Yidden sollen kennen machen von der Welt hat dir auf der Eibishten durch Yidden's Schema Torah mitzvahs. The whole purpose of the mitzvahs Bnei Noach is so that a Yid should be able to have a world within which to fulfill Torah mitzvahs. Und der Riber ist echt das Scharfe eines auf die Zayin mitzvahs am Mesuvav, Tivi und Lemata, was kommt der Gemele von sehr tachlis. So now, if a guy does a Shem Mitzvah B'nei Noach, and thus makes it possible for the Yid to do his mission, his purpose, so when that mission and purpose is fulfilled, the positive energy that comes out into this world will automatically, by itself, be also part of it will also go to the Umas Ha'olam who made this possible. But it's not a schar or an oynish, it's a natural outcome of what is going on in the world. This will also explain a fascinating idea. Why by Bnei Noach there's no different levels of punishments. If they transgress one of their mitzvahs, then they all have the same punishment, which is misa. Nicht wie bei Zel, was der Zel wird nicht auf Adam. Not like a shade, a shadow that changes according to the person's actions. By Umay Sa'ilam, there's no shade, there's no shadow according to the David. And therefore, either they have a reason for existence or they have no reason for existence. If they have no reason for existence, they're removed from this world, Misa. So there's not going to be different punishments based on different levels because it's either they're part of the program or they're not part of the program. So if they're doing what they're supposed to, they're contributing to the Shavas Yitzhara so that a Yid should be able to do Teiro mitzvahs, then they get a piece of that. But if not, Misa. So according to the David, Schar v'Einish by Umas Ha'olam is a natural result of the bigger picture. Taken according to the Rambam, like we said, there's a sale, and their reward or their punishment reflects their actions in this world. Sif Yud Aleph. Und in dem besteht Achiluk b'pnimi so in Yonim v'gamol derech ha'aloch zwischen die beide Perushim in Rashi. So now we'll understand the difference between the two shittas in Rashi according to Chassidus. The first Pirush where it says Maginam v'chaskam, this is going according to the shit of the Ravid. That's Bnei Noach and the Begeder Heder. The Bnei Noach are non-existent, halachically. And their reward and punishment is only something that is happening by itself as a result of a greater picture. And therefore he can say that it means the shade of Hashem, because there is no shade of Hashem. Therefore, he has to say it means their own internal support system. Because of their own righteous people, this gives them strength, but this is not something that's happening from above. The second Pirush, that would be according to the Rambam. As is eine Begeder Metzias, that they are a Metzias, they are an entity, and there is a Shecha Pratis, and therefore there could be Tzila Shalamakim on them. Even though the Rambam is going to agree with the Ravid that the existence of Bnei Noach and the mitzvahs of Bnei Noach are b'shul Yisrael for the greater good, for Lasheves Yitzhara, so the Yidden should be able to do Torah mitzvahs in this world. The Rambam is going to have a different approach. Since there is a commandment to them on these mitzvahs, ubifrat as the mitzvahs tzivo ben HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Torah v'heidiyon al Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Eibusher put these mitzvahs into the Torah and conveyed it to us through Moshe Rabbeinu. Darf man sagen as durch zeir mekayim seid dem Tzivu von Eibuschten peilen ze dugmase hamshacha melmayla. Therefore, we must say, since Hashem gave this tzivui, it has to create something. It has to make something happen. So it has to be that when Ben Noach does this mitzvah that he was commanded by the Eibishter in Torah, that it will affect something from above. Therefore, it's possible for the concept of shade, which is, as we said before, specific to this individual, to this person. It's something specific. It's possible because the Eibishter created this, gave this tzivui. So the Eibusher made a possibility for the person through the tzivui to accomplish something, according to the Rambam. Bizes wird angerufen tzilam, to the point that it can be their shade. It's something that's their own thing, because according to the Rambam, once the Rambam holds that they are a mitzias, therefore, even though their mitzvahs are for the greater good, nevertheless, they were the ones who were given this mitzvah by the Eibusher, and therefore that mitzvah could accomplish something, and therefore it could make it sale, and they could have tzilam. And then for the second shot, Rashi says that they initially had the sale of the Eibishter. So this is almost the same as what we said previously in Sif Tes. The added element in Sif Yud in Yud and Yud Aleph is the idea of can Ben Noach bring down a tzeil milamayla, and dependent on that would be schar v'oinish. According to the Rabbi, there's no tzeil milamayla, therefore there's no schar v'oinish. It's just the schar v'oinish is b'derech memela. It's an automatic outcome from the bigger picture. Saying according to the Rambam, they are able to draw down tzilam from above as a result of their actions, and therefore it's shayach to say sar tzilam me'aleim, that it's tzili shalamokim. Sif Yud Beis, we're going to go back to the Psukim. We're going to say that now we'll understand the Psukim even better. And what he's going to do is actually a little bit hard to understand in Mamish in the words of the Sikha. But the Pashtus is the way I understand it is that that Yeshua and Kalev are actually telling the Yidden that there's going three levels. They're adding more and more with regards to what is going to happen if Ba'Hashem al Timredu, if we follow in the ways of Hashem. We can understand better some of the questions that we have in the Psukim and Rashi. Why Bechlal did Yeshua and Kalev add the words that start Sila Me'aleim, that their shadow, their shade, their protection was removed? So the previous pasuk, because that's what Eibishter wants, he's going to give us a land flowing with milk and honey. It's necessary. Why Bechlal even the beginning of this pasuk, that if you don't rebel against Hashem, you will go with Eibishter's strength. There's no reason to be afraid of them. We're going to eat them like bread. That the nations will be given into the hands of the Yidden in a friendly way and in a smiling in a shining countenance. This is all relevant to tell the Yidden how they have to conduct themselves. Don't be afraid. Go in and do what you have to do, and to sein good. Why do Yeshua and Kalev have to excuse me, tell the Yidden what's going on with the nations? In other words, if the Eibusher is going to give it us the land, as they said he would, and if we don't rebel on Hashem, we don't interfere, why did the Yidden have to know what's happening with the protection? We already know that Hashem is going to give it to us. We have no reason to be afraid. Base. Is my kamash wants to start silam. To go a step deeper, if we know that we can eat them like bread, which means that they're going to be given into our hands, then obviously they have no tzilam. So what's the chiddush? Gimel, the end of the pasuk it says, "V'Hashem itanu al tiraum." You already said al tiru asama oretz. Why does he have to repeat again al tiraum? Don't be afraid of them. Dal you say to mizu and more than that. Sagt as his genug as al timreidu v'tumela zayin v'shuv al tiru. First he said that when you have al timreidu, that's enough, and because of that, it's al tiru. Don't be afraid of the people. Here he's saying that because Hashem itanu, therefore al tiru. It seems to contradict. If al timreidu is enough, why do you need Vashem itanu? Is there beer in them? So here's the explanation. And first he introduces something, and then he goes back to the beer. When the Yidden conquered Eretz Yisrael, there were three different categories of things that happened to the nations. Mason, number one, many of them died. They went to war, they died. Number two, v'gerashtamai gleich batel legamri. They were expelled, they were chased out of the land. That happened right away. That's the second thing. The first group died, second group were kicked out. And then the third group is agorshenu. They will be expelled, but noch dem as tifra. The pasuk says that if they would expel all the goyim right away, then the land would be empty and the animals would come and inhabit the land. So the Eibush is going to leave people for a while until the Yidden will multiply and inhabit the land, and then the Eibush will expel the rest of the nations. When insufficient, and in the interim, the people that were there would become servants to the Yidden, lachmeinu, similar to the concept of there being our bread. Behemshech lahanal. So to follow up on this as follows. Even according to the second opinion in Nashi, that by the nations there is a concept of the Eibishter's protection. It's obviously understood that the Hashgacha Pratis that is on the nations is nothing compared to the Hashgacha Pratis on Yidden. Ukenal, as the mitzvahs from the Yidden is the Kavan and Ze'alein, as I said before, the mitzvahs of the Yidden, the mitzvahs themselves is the whole purpose. So therefore, the Hashgacha Pratis that is caused by those mitzvahs is going to be much greater than mitzvahs that are being done just for the sake of Yishuv Ha'olam by the Yidden. So this was Yeshua and Kalev's emphasis. It's First, you have to know that you're on two different levels. Even if there is a Hashgacha Pratis over there, it doesn't compare to you. So as long as you have the Eibishter on your side, as long as you don't rebel against the Eibishter, you have nothing to be afraid of. That was their first statement, don't be afraid. The Nachman is a basic event. Nachman, sort zilum me'aleim. Lei mi boy leit nashten pirush in rasha sar magina mechaskam. Reich leit pirush zile shalamokim sar me'aleim. Then now they told them, even the sale that they do have, even according to the second pirush, that there is zile shalamokim, that was taken away from them. Unachmer, and here comes a third darga. Not only did they lose their sale, nor Unachmer vidas, the Hashem is nor itanu. Hashem is not just they don't have a shade, but the shade is with us. Hashem is with us. Not only do the Yidden not have the shade of Hashem, the protection of Hashem, nor Hashem itanu. Das heißt, by the even when there is tzili shalamakim, but it's only a makif. Makif means that it's from far away. It's a distant protection. Or by Eden is the Eibishter nit nur b'chinas makif, nor echitonu. Mit zayin hashkach is sich misyachet mit uns. By the Eibishter, and Yidden, it's not just that the Eibishter is a tzel from the distance. Nor itonu is with us, he becomes one with us. Is v'meila muva, not das bringt nit nur al tiru asam oretz. So obviously this brings about not just that we shouldn't be afraid of the people of the land, nor eich al tirum stam. We don't have to be afraid of them at all. Not only as they inhabit the land, not only do they lose, are they not anymore the people of the land because they were given into our hands like bread. They become totally nullified because they have no shade at all. So the way I understand this is that there's three levels here in the psukim. There's Vashem al timreidu va'atem al tiru as ha'aretz. That first of all, realize that you have nothing to be afraid of. Number two, sartzila me'aleim, that they have lost their tzeil, meaning to say that their tzeil is, which initially was only b'chinas makiv, now is not there at all. And number three, Hashem itanu al tirom, we have the tzeil of Hashem, and not as a makiv, but rather as as one with us, and therefore legabe us, the Yidden, the Amoritz don't even exist. Al tirum, it doesn't even say the words Amoritz. It doesn't fit perfectly into the words, but this is the way I understood it. And according to this, then you have these three levels would fit in to the three sugim in kibush haaretz. When you say al tiru es haaretz ki lachmeinu heim, that's referring to the third level mentioned here, agarshenu. But in the interim, they will be lachmeinu, they will be our servants. When it says sar tzilo me'aleim, they have no tzeil, therefore it's v'ger ashtamei. They will be expelled from Eretz Yisrael right away. When it says Hashem itanu al tirom, therefore they don't even exist, that's in the Misa, there's no existence of the Amoritz. And he adds in the end of the Sikha, v'yashleimar adozayin and eich the andere drei sugim. This also is consistent with three other sugim that it speaks about what actually happened to them. That number one, it says like Sechaya kol neshama, you should not let them live, which this would be the union of Misa, that they cease to exist entirely. Then there's the idea of Asu Shalom and given the Masa Avaducha, they made peace and they paid their taxes and they served. That was the idea of Lachmeinu Heim, which worked in the pasuk of Al Tiru Asamaretz ki Lachmeinu Heim. And then there's another thing which is discussed in Yerushalmi, Girgashi Pino Lafriki, the nation of Girgashi, they ran away to Africa. Later they came back saying that we want our land back. But in the meantime, when Yidden the Bakumen, so they say, when the Girgashi ran away, the Yidden received their fields ready planted and their vineyards ready filled with grapes. So that was the inyan of Gerashtamei Gleich, which was Sart Sila Me'alehem. Again, I don't. It doesn't fit perfectly into the words, but Kachnirele and Niasdaiti, the best way to understand this, and Metem L'Chacham V'Yach Kamoid.